All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today's 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 28th, if I'm not mistaken? 29th. Thank you. 29th, and we have City Council Charter Review Committee review. There was a resolution that was presented by our former council member, Zuhair Abdul Haq. At one point, this was back on September the 14th of last year.
16th.
No, it's 14th. September 14th.
I probably signed it.
2021, and we are doing a study session at this particular point to go ahead and continue to move this forward. One of the things in that resolution, which you can find it if you'd like to look up the minutes from September 14th, 2021, I'm just going to go over some of the major points involved. At our regular meeting for the City of Dearborn Heights City Council held on September 14th, 2021, the following resolution was offered. And I'm just going to go over the bullet points, not every single point on there. Whereas such a committee of the City Council should review the city charter with respect to the city charter provisions that should be updated, revised, amended, or added, and thereafter report its findings and recommendations to the entire City Council in order for the entire City Council to take any actions it deems appropriate. In addition to that, be it further resolved that the City Council shall select 3 of its council members to serve on the committee by a vote or votes of the City Council. And lastly, be it further resolved that the committee shall conduct 3 public hearings to give residents, the administration, and other city stakeholders the opportunity to provide input into the committee's review of the city charter and into any findings and recommendations that the committee shall make to the entire City Council. So at this particular point, it is just going to be a general overview as far as the charter revisions and which direction we're going to take as a City Council, and this will be with the help of our great City Clerk's office, our mayor and his administration, and of course our corporation councilor Gary Miyake, in addition to us as City Council, and input from the residents. One of the people that I asked to come in today, I figured this would be a good idea to be able to pick up some best practices. The City of Dearborn, as some of you may or may not know, had elected officials in this particular case to the Charter Review Board. And amongst them is Hassan Abdallah, who, for full transparency, is my cousin. He's the chairperson of the Charter Review Revision, and they have been meeting, if I'm not mistaken, for roughly around 3 or 4 months. He'll give us more specific details on that. And I figured it'd be a good idea for him to come in and speak to us about some of the pluses, the minuses, and just different things and best practices that he has learned while on a charter review revision.
Council Chair, just want to note that there is a big distinction between the Charter Review Commission in Dearborn and this as a committee.
Correct.
And
go ahead.
So just to be
no, go ahead. Clarify. It's okay.
Oh no, that was all I was going to say. That their Charter Review Commission is something that's actually required, and then you can end up having elected members of that. This is an internal group within the City Council that would come up with recommendations to the councils about
Correct.
it. So there is a distinction in terms of the way it's done. But other than that, it'd be great to hear from them.
No problem. So Hassan Abdallah, come on up if you don't mind. He's got a PowerPoint presentation that he presented to all of us, so each one of you guys should have this in front of you. Go ahead.
Good evening, respected council members, City of Dearborn officials, Mr. Mayor, and Corporation Council. Thank you for having me. My name is.
If you could do me a favor, bring the microphone as close as possible.
I will do my best. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right, I'll start over. Respected council members, City of Dearborn officials, Mr. Mayor, and Corporation Council, thank you for having me. My name is Hassan Abdallah. I currently serve as the chairman of the City of Dearborn Charter Commission. I'm a regulatory and municipal compliance attorney by trade, and currently serve as the compliance officer for NYU and Oscar Health. So what I've put together for you, and Corporation Council did make a good distinction, is a general high-level outline of a lot of the considerations and process involved in a charter review, whether it's done by a full commission, as we're doing in Dearborn, or in this case by essentially what would be a subcommittee of the City Council. I know Council Chair talked about best practices. I hope what I can offer could be construed as best practices. I will say that as you go through a charter, and I had the opportunity to review the Dearborn Heights Charter, at least through a general read-through. As you go through a charter, you learn a lot about how much has changed in statutory law applicable to municipal government, as well as potential misalignments of what's actually occurring in the city versus what's written in the charter. And so what I've put together for the council and administration is a high-level outline. What I would like to go over is just the overall objectives, the city charter, what its purpose and role is within city government, the charter review process, whether it's by subcommittee or by a commission, and then the charge of the review commission or the review board, or in this case, a subcommittee. And then I'm going to leave it open to questions, and that's the ultimate goal, is to create as much dialogue as possible. I did mention to council chair and to the city clerk's office just before the meeting that in similar fashion, I have been, retained as not as counsel, but as a consultant in this space for the city of Hamtramck. It's a space of work that for some reason I find interest in, but I hope that I can offer some good counsel or at least advice and best practice for you guys today. In the first page, you just see an outline, and then after that, I'll get into the city charter, its purpose and role within city government. As you all likely know, the foundation of a local government and the charter serves as the foundation of local government and its constitution, essentially. It also serves as both an evidentiary and legal standard within city government. And there are specific provisions in a city charter that do that, and I can go into those in more detail a little bit later. It establishes the framework, much like an operating manual in a corporation or business, around key day-to-day functions of your residents' lives, right? It talks about your taxes, your tax system, public safety, your election processes, and the structure of your city's administration. It outlines the powers of all branches of government, so it will delineate what are the powers of council, what are the powers of the mayor, including veto powers, what are the powers of council. If you look at model charters, there's a lot of things about, their investigative powers, their ability to enact and enforce ordinances, the punishments or penalties applicable to that. It defines the city's administration. So for example, if you look at the city of Dearborn right now, there's a large shift in the city's administration under the leadership of Mayor Hammoud. Mayor Hammoud has come in and they've redefined essentially what that entire administration looks like, both in title and in structure. And so the city charter is something that can reflect that. I am of the preference that I like city charters to give deference to both administrations and councils, because one thing to remember is that your city charter is essentially mandating. It's what you want to have essentially serve as almost permanent to the city's framework. And a violation of the city charter by state law is considered a misdemeanor. And so that's another thing to think of when you're thinking about the language and the applicability of it, and not wanting to be too granular in that language, because then Mr. Miyake would be a very busy corporation counsel and having to defend that in litigation. It talks about the inclusions of boards and commissions. For example, within Dearborn, we have the Civil Service Commission, the Charter Commission, our Board of Ethics, our Library Commission are all mandated by charter. We also have a Traffic Commission that was newly adopted by referendum that's now mandated in charter as well. So you think about what are some key things that a city needs, and does it make more sense for that to live under the administration in a specific department, or does that make sense to delegate that through an appointed body or a multi-member body within a board or commission? Again, I talked about the taxation process, retirement funds. That's another big piece in a lot of city charters. Within Dearborn, we have the Chapter 21 and 23 retirement and pension funds, which pertain to our public safety officers and their beneficiaries. So that's another thing that I didn't have the chance to look in specifically of Dearborn Heights' charter, but that's another thing that if it lives in there, you want to think about what that applicable language looks like and how that impacts this body and the decisions you guys make towards those funds. I'll continue to go through, and then I'll leave at the end for questions if that's best for you guys. The charter review process. So why you review? One of the main standard of which charter reviews live under is the Home Rule City Act, Act 279 of 1909, which essentially establishes two main frameworks. Is one, the necessity to have a charter review on a periodic basis, and then two, it gives the ability for cities to mandate what that process looks like. In the city of Dearborn, the question of a charter review comes up on a ballot every 12 years. So every 12 years on an election ballot, it'll come up to the voters and ask them, essentially in this last primary, it was in Proposal A and says, do you want to review the charter? And if the majority says yes, then in that following general election, a couple months later, the electors will elect a 9-member body, which is now the Charter Commission, to take charge of reviewing the charter itself. There are a lot of different ways that Charter Commission reviews boards or commissions are constructed across different cities. I've seen them where they are elected, and there's benefits and non-benefits to having that. I've seen a full appointment process. I think one thing that you guys want to think about is the necessity for independence of your Charter Review Commission. And the reason being is because as we act as an independent body, it gives us both the flexibility to be able to have an exploratory and investigative review of the charter. So what happens prior, and I'll talk about this in the road ahead in funding, but what happens is prior to Proposal A being passed last year, the Dearborn City Council had to, by mandate of our charter and state law that's applicable to it, they had to pass a resolution that established essentially two things. One, the budget that the Charter Commission would have should it be established, and two, the time frame, the maximum amount of meetings that commission would have in order to complete its review. So they established a 90-meeting max and about a $90,000 budget throughout that time. But granted, close to half of that is dedicated to the compensation of the individuals who serve on the commission because we are elected officials and get paid for being at meetings. So the remainder of the budget is at the discretion of the commission, and should we ever need more money, not that I anticipate we would come back to the council for that. So it's that level of independence in government and review is something to take into strong consideration. Other points about the review process I'll talk about is what a charter can or can't do, at least at a basis, consideration for changes, and the ballot referendum process. So next page will talk to you about funding, and this is why it's really important for this body and the specific committee that would be in charge of this to understand what that would look like. As I look today and as I've looked at, and I know that in our city meetings, we publicize all our meetings, but that's also because we're subject to the Open Meetings Act, and so we have CDTV streaming, which is our City of Dearborn Television. They stream our meetings. We stream them on Zoom. We made the decision to incur that cost because we felt that the publicity and the necessity for our residents to be engaged and educated about our discussions and decisions was of crucial importance. But you want to look at minimizing financial obligations, and that's where a council resolution at the start and prior to your review is necessary, is to understand, okay, what is this time frame that we're going to work with that we want to establish? In general, across the country, usually 2 to 3 years is that process. You want to have a commitment of members, both from the administration and the city council, should city council members serve on that commission, as well as from the public. One of the things that we've seen a lot of is our corporation council comes to our meetings, but solely in an advisory role. The corporation council does not make any binding decisions, nor are they allowed to counsel us on specific language that we should develop. Jeremy Romer, Corporation Counsel of Dearborn, and his staff, when they attend our meetings, they usually are answering two types of questions that we ask. One is specific legal interpretation that we may need, and the second one is how things currently exist in the administration versus what we're seeing in the charter. And the reason that's important is because if you're already identifying that there are things happening to violate the charter, you probably want to have either council resolution amend that pretty quickly or ensure that the review of your charter includes and reflects those changes as well. Subject matter expertise. If there is any best practice we've picked up in the few months we've met, is the necessity for subject matter expertise. Your city charter, to my earlier point about the language and the applicability of the language, it's the most important legal document in your city. And the reason that's important, besides the fact that we don't want to inundate Mr. Miyake with boundless amounts of litigation, is the fact that depending on the boards and commissions and the authoritative powers you put in your charter, that will also give rise to potential other issues that you may run into on a city basis from a legal perspective. So when I talked about the charter being your evidentiary and legal standard, that's where it starts, because essentially everything you do in your city should follow your city charter, and that is your legal standard. That's your, standard that you want to be able to follow. And so some of the expertise that I have found to be most effective for us, people who have experience in legal writing, regulatory law, corporate or municipal compliance, municipal legislation, tax, election processes, and civic engagement. Those are the areas that we have found to be the most applicable to our review. And again, I've noted this, but council should adopt a resolution to establish a budget and meeting timeframe, resource, etc. Mr. Miyake notated the distinction between an elected body reviewing the commission versus what the city of Dearborn Heights is adopting here. So you're not subject to those same requirements by law. However, you will find that creating that framework and expectations through resolution now will allow for a better process and smoother process later on. Moving on into the road ahead, aside from the fact that it's a lot of work, residents of a community have the right and responsibility to shape their local government, and you'll want to identify what that would look like within your review process. I've heard and read the council resolution about the potential appointment of 2 members of the public, I believe it was. And so if that is the case, you're going to want to think about what that appointment process would look like. What we have done in our City Charter Commission is we establish a public engagement subcommittee. And so what we've done is we have our commission, and then we have a subcommittee that is going to appoint 6 members of our public that will be there, not in a binding role, but in an advisory opinion to get feedback, think about ideas. But more importantly, and this is where I feel the role of the public plays a bigger role, is when you finish with your review, you're going to have to put this on a ballot we will at least have to put this on a ballot for the voters to approve on. So any amendments to your charter would have to go through the same ballot referendum. So what we have seen is that these 6 appointed people are also going to serve as ambassadors of our charter commission, right? Is that when we finish our review, we want them to be able to serve as voices and ambassadors within their networks, their city, their neighborhood organizations to say that, yes, we do want to support this charter review, and hopefully that through their role, we want to be able to get there. So to move forward, again, there's a lot of high-level outlines about some best practices in there, and I think the one piece I want to note before concluding, or at least leading to questions, is the ballot referendum process. Charter reviews are subject to the review of your Attorney General within the state of Michigan. So upon that completion, it would go to the Attorney General's office. They would review it mainly for compliance with state law. I'll tell you one of the big ones that Dearborn has to uniquely deal with, because we're the only city that still has them, is staffing mandates for public staffing mandates. So we had a provision within our charter that had staffing mandates for our public safety. By law, those have to go out, because in the 2011 legislation no longer allows that within city charters. And so whenever we would send that to the AG's office, they would tell us that we'd have to remove that. And then lastly, I just included a slide about the charge or the duties of the review commission. Those are some things that you want to consider when you're thinking about the people who will serve on it. My biggest one is probably 4 and 5, which is draft with the intent of transparency and with as much layman language as possible. You want to make this so that your general public could read and understand it. And lastly, maintain integrity, rules of order, and flexibility in your review process. So when you think about adopting a resolution for time frame and budgets, that's what you probably want to be as your North Star. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Well put together.
Thank you, sir.
At this particular point, I just want to check before we go to our corporation councilor, Gary Miyake, and maybe if the mayor wants to also mention anything. Any questions for Hassan before he gets off the podium?
Councilor Chair.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Fadlallah. Great presentation. My first question, you mentioned something about Proposal A. Is that a state proposal or is that a City of Dearborn proposal?
So it's a City of Dearborn proposal that's created by the mandate of our charter. So because of the fact that we subject our charter to review every 12 years within our charter, that every 12 years it goes to the ballot in a primary election. This year it was called Proposal A, and it asks the voters whether or not they want to review the charter, and if that's approved, in the following November election, they elect a 9-body commission.
Thank you. And my second question is, What's the process in the city of Dearborn of appointing the members of the public, the 6 people you appointed?
Yeah, so we established a subcommittee which includes 3 members of the commission, and then we put we didn't want to bind ourselves to qualifications so much as we did want to make sure of two main things. Is one, residency was a requirement that we put. We wanted to make sure that the people were residents of the city of Dearborn. 2, we have an application process. So it's actually on our city's website, which we have a charter commission page on our city's website. You click on the link, the application says, essentially a statement of interest, what are some past roles you've played in civic engagement and government, and then we do a 30-minute interview with every single applicant, and then 2 of 3 of our committee members have to vote in the affirmative to nominate that person, and then the full commission, the full 9-body commission votes on the appointment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Go ahead, Councilman.
I'm just curious, what type of time deadline did the Dearborn Charter Commission set for getting their work completed?
Yeah, so the city council establishes that by resolution. That's one. So the Home Rule Act within the state requires that if you mandate a review of your charter, which is what we have, council has to pass that resolution. So prior to Proposal 8 even being passed, council has to pass that resolution for budgetary reasons, right? They want to make sure that coming into this time frame, we have that prepared. So they established a 90-meeting maximum and a budget of approximately $90,000. The last time there was a charter commission within Dearborn, which was 2006, they met 73 times. They had a 90-meeting maximum as well, but they met 73 times before the charter went on the ballot.
Okay,
And it took about, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Councilman. It took about a little over 2 years.
Councilor Abdullah and Gary Matke, what we're anticipating is more of a charter update than like major changes. Is that a fair statement?
Well, yeah, my understanding was that the committee was to basically focus in on specific items that would be a concern and then end up coming up with something as opposed to a charter review. Charter Review Commission can basically come up and say, you know what, we think we're going to go to a council manager form of government, and that's what we're going to recommend. And recommend a change in basically everything.
Which is what they did in Inkster.
Yeah,
They
without,
went to a strong mayor
right.
form of government.
and, and I'm not judging that one way or the other. I'm just saying my impression based on the discussions of the council last year was that the council wanted to go with a committee as opposed to a revision in order to make some changes of things that were obsolete.
Specific items.
Right, and not necessarily inconsequential items, but things that people really felt needed to be updated and really felt need to be clear. One of the things that you run into whenever you do any sort of changes to the charter is, yes, there's stuff in there about justices of the peace and the Wayne County Commission and all these other things, and you can sit there and say, well, we can change all those things, and then you sit there and say, but do we really need to? I mean, they're not affecting anything because other law has superseded those things at this point. So, but then if you sat there and said, geez, we really need to split off something in terms of a department or merge departments, those are types of things that you can end up doing with a charter amendment, and that's what I'm under the impression that this honorable body was intending to do by establishing a committee. Not to say that what's been offered by Mr. Abdullah is not relevant. It's relevant because it tells us kind of some of the best practices and things along those lines, but it's not necessarily where I thought you were going with this process.
So Gary, for us to get started on our end, in our city, what are the next steps that need to be taken by us as a body? Of course, electing 3 council members.
Yes, based on and some of it is, remember, we've got some timeframes that are staring us in the face. Essentially, you have to end up having everything ready 12 weeks before the election. And in order to meet that time frame, you also have to take into account that you have to submit a proposed amendment or proposed amendments to the governor's office, And then technically speaking, it gets sent over to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General reviews. What I've done in the past is send it to both at the same time. Just contact George Elworth, who I believe is still there based on the communication that we have. And contact him and give him a heads up and send them the stuff in advance. But then recognize the way this is stated in the resolution, you're supposed to have 3 public hearings. So
Right.
you're going to end up having meetings, 3 public hearings, publication for those public hearings, and try to get all that done basically by mid-June. Strikes me as being overly ambitious at this
Well,
point.
we're not under the gun, obviously, to finish it in a particular time. This is just something, I mean, this has been around since 1963, so it's not like we have a particular deadline, but it's just something that's been important to different council members, and as I mentioned earlier, former council member Zuhair Abdul Haq, to continue moving forward with this, and I'm all for it. So we're not on a deadline to finish by June. At least I don't see it that way.
Right. And my advice would be, if you really want to end up doing this well, and you want input from the public and do the public hearings, and you really want it to be considered, it's going to require more consideration and time
Okay.
than that. I mean, that would be my advice, and then it could go on for next year's, one of next year's elections.
I think it'd be a better.
That would be better that way, yes.
Mr. Mayor, do you have something to add in regards to this? Oh, you have more?
And
Sure, go ahead.
counselors, and especially Counselor Abdullah, so things like, they passed a state law outlawing minimum mannings in police and fire charters, or I think there's an outlawed local regulation regarding pit bulls, different regulations. So you just take that out of the charter?
Yeah, so regarding staffing mandates, luckily you guys won't have to deal with that. Dearborn was the only unique city that still had them for public safety models, but it's staffing mandates across the board. It's not just for public safety. It would be any type of staffing mandate mandated by city government. But essentially, to Mr. Miyake's point, it would be any conflict with state law you would want to make sure is removed or is at least amended to comply with the applicable state law. And so that's, to Mr. Miyake's point about the types of changes that would occur. One question I always ask to any commissioner who's proposing language changes is, what in our current model of government isn't working to be able to address this issue versus having to mandate it by charter? Because you got to remember, when you talk about mandating by charter, at minimum for us, it would be in effect for the next 12 years, right? Unless changed through a different referendum process, which is very unlikely. And so we've had a numerous amount of changes that are grammatical in nature, legally in nature. We've had sections change because of the formatting of the charter just wasn't properly put together. And so the changes that you will consider kind of vary. A lot of them will be related to applicable state law per your question, and a lot of them will be about, you may have committee members or review members who think of this of the opportunity to create a new model of government should you go that route. Most charter review commissions that I've been observing don't go as that drastic, but to Mr. Miyake's point, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time. The process just to get it to the governor and AG's office is one within itself. If you're mandating by resolution that you have 3 public hearings, I commend you for that, but I also want to caution what that requires and what may come with that in terms of feedback. And so I think Councilman Constant asked about the time frame. I would certainly allocate for a minimum of 12 to 18 months before you're ready to put this on a ballot.
Okay, thank you, Hassan.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Council Chair, and thank you, Attorney Abdullah. This is very informative. I like it. I think we should do a thorough revision of the charter. Some of the stuff that we're doing day-to-day operations, we're discovering a lot of gaps. Back in '63, the charter was okay back in the day, but now I've seen a lot of gaps, a lot of issues, obviously with the charter, and it's making us not competitive. And not to mention some of them here. However, there's certain criteria for, say, for some elected officials. They should have certain, instead of just anybody going for certain positions, they have to have an experience in a particular position. Otherwise, you're not going to be competitive, or the city's not going to be competitive in that part of it. Again, I'm not mentioning anything in particular, but some of the stuff I've noticed, I think every section in the charter has a gap, and it just leaves us, there's a lot of liabilities, and again, it's making us not competitive with staffing and everything else. So I think the best thing to do for the city at this point is to have a full-blown review of the whole charter. And if we're going to do it, we better do it right this time. You know, we have a chance to do it right. And I think that's the best thing to do, is to go full-blown with a revision or modification, whatever we need to do to the charter. And again, you know, I know you were at the event yesterday, Council Chair, and we did talk to some folks from the county, right. And they did actually recommend, obviously they're aware of our charter, that we bring a consultant. Obviously we have to go through the process, right. But bring in a consultant and just let us know they can go through this. And instead of, obviously there's, cities have the best, you know, I've seen some charters by other cities. There's amazing charters that I've seen in the last few months, and the consultant can actually tell us the best practices. So instead of reinventing the wheel, we can go through and say, you know what, this is section so-and-so, you know, it's, you know, best practice by this city. And, you know, this is something we need to look at, and a consultant can help us with that.
Correct. The gentleman from the county mentioned that he's going to email to me a list of potential consulting firms that can help us with that. And according to him, this will take our process and almost, I know it's just a quote, but slice it in half as far as the time frame that's involved.
And again, it's not like we can, for transparency purposes, obviously, once we have a list, you know, we can go out for bid. Correct. And just to make sure, it's just for transparency.
Correct, yeah. Correct, absolutely. Okay, Gary, if you don't mind, the councilman had a question.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention, remember when we're using the term amendment versus revision, very important legal distinction. If you're going to do a revision, like for example, go from a strong mayor form of government like we have to a council manager form of government, that would have to be done by virtue of a revision, which requires that you end up having a charter review commission. And you have to have an elected body that ends up doing that, like they've done in Dearborn. If you're going to do amendments, then you can end up having that kind of elected body, or you could end up having them being proposed and going through a review process. So part of it depends on how much you feel it needs to end up being done in terms of the review versus amendments. And again, remember, when it comes to the review or for a revision, you have to end up using an elected body to end up doing that.
On an amendment like we are proposing, will we still have to go in front of the voters once we come to an agreement as far as what the changes are?
Yes, absolutely. All changes to the charter have to end up, you know, for example, I've mentioned a few times the idea of having a charter amendment that would make sure that we don't end up selling the Warren Valley Golf Course, all right? That would be a kind of a built-in protection that would require voter approval to change any of that. That could be something that we would do without a revision, in my view. That could be done by an amendment to the city charter. But if you're going to end up doing anything that changes the powers between the mayor and the council, for example, you always have to take into account, once you get into those issues, you potentially end up needing a charter review commission that actually is empowered to do revisions. You do anything that's really, really significant, you potentially need to go that route with it.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Councilman, go ahead.
I guess this was going to be for either attorneys here. Like right now, I guess the big thing is we see the confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court, and they go before the legislative body of the country. Now, right now, all our commissions are done by the mayor with council concurrence on some of them, right? So if we want them all to be, like, say, we want to say, well, if there's 7-member board, council wants to have 3 themselves. We'd have to do a revision of the council or of the charter, or is that an amendment to the charter?
That would be something I would feel the need to research, because to be frank, you are talking about changing the relative power structure between the council and mayor. My tendency, if you sat there and said, you got to give me an answer right now, would be to say that you could do it with an amendment. But because it has to do with that tension between different branches in the government and the real workings of government at that level, that may be something that requires a revision, and I would want to research that before I give you a definitive
So that would be
answer.
the same thing, say, for instance, I'm just going to pick the treasurer, for instance. Say we want an appointed treasurer instead of an elected treasurer.
I tend to think that that could end up actually being done by an amendment, because you're not talking about the relative powers between the executive and the legislative branch.
Okay.
I mean, I would look into that, obviously, before it'd be done, but my sense is you could probably do that by virtue of an amendment. And like, I know Dearborn did that many years ago. I remember meeting when I was like a student with Treasurer Hubbard, if I recall correctly, over in his office.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
You're dating yourself, sir.
And then they changed that
No,
to
Frank
do that.
was
So,
in this one.
so my sense is that could probably be done by an amendment, but I think I would want to end up checking that before I would say definitively, yeah, that's not something that require a revision.
Because I know going through the charter, there's a lot of old things about, especially with salaries for everybody, and everything is mentioned as he, and it doesn't say she, but all of that stuff is really irrelevant, correct?
Well, all that stuff is desirable to clean up, but legally, does it end up making a difference in terms of how you function? No, because state law, for example, is going to supersede something that's conflicting, and we just don't do it anyways.
Right.
Right? So, and then not only that, there is a gender-neutral provision within the city charter that basically says wherever you use a certain pronoun, it doesn't really matter in terms of things. So, that kind of covers it, even though frankly, if someone sat there and said, we should reprint the whole thing, I might sit there and say, yeah, we should be gender neutral. That would be a good thing. Are you going to go through the whole process in order to basically do that and the expense that's involved? You might, but you might also sit there and say, well, we've got to have the attention, as Mr. Abdallah ended up saying, of the public in order to go through with the charter amendments. And if you propose too much, then you're potentially going to lose their attention. Or, for example, we had a really uncontroversial thing, splitting off it was a Department of Parks, Recreation, and Library, splitting that off a number of years ago. And it got rejected
Went to the voters twice.
by the voters once. And then we had to wait a certain amount of time before we could bring it up again, and then it was like, oh, yeah. And I think it was because the Detroit News ran an editorial, and they didn't understand why we were doing it. And it was like, it's just because it doesn't operate that way. The libraries have all been operating independently for years. We don't need to do it this way.
I feel more comfortable having an elected body do this than 3 council people. For some reason,
You're talking about elected body as in commissioners?
like
Dearborn.
with
Similar to
Dearborn,
Dearborn's, okay.
having an elected body do this instead of just 3 city council people do this, you open it up to the public, more eyes, more,
Input.
more different interests and everything. And not to say that council people can't be on it or won't run for it, it's just, to me, it
No,
just
they
seems.
can't be. They cannot be. You cannot be a current city official.
And that's fine, and then they won't, okay? But I think there's enough qualified people in the city that would want to run for that job and have it. I think the business that this council has to do all year long is enough for us to handle.
Yeah, if I may, and I present this not because I think that that's an incorrect way of looking at things. It's occurred, and I've heard stories about this occurring, where what ends up happening is the commission ends up, a revision commission ends up being hijacked by people who have a particular interest, and they just hijack it and do what they're going to end up doing.
But doesn't that have to come before us anyway?
No, it goes, what they come up with ends up going over
okay, I
right onto
understand.
the ballot. So
But I mean, that
you-
could be the
you're-
same thing with 3 people from this body, too.
Yeah, but no, not really, because you ultimately have the say of whether or not.
Okay, I
something
see
gets
what
on
you're
the
saying.
ballot.
Yes,
Right.
ultimately, all of us are going to vote on it anyway after.
Right, in terms of the committee, if you end up doing the commission, the revision commission, then it just basically what they come up with goes onto the ballot, and you don't have any input except as ordinary citizens at
Okay.
that point.
I understand that.
Okay.
Council Chair.
Thank you very much. Councilman, go ahead.
Well, 2 things. Number 1, remember the big enemy is time, because we've had this started several times, but it hasn't gone anywhere. But an example of what Corporation Counsel said was what happened in Inkster. A particular individual who came in 3rd in the judge's race, very close, ran, and Inkster had a ceremonial mayor. So he got elected mayor, which paid like $12,000 a year. It was part-time, and he pushed through, some say with city money, a strong mayor form of government. And then his salary was tied to what the city of Dearborn mayor made, so his went from like $12,000 to over $100,000 a year. Then he was voted out of the office the next term. So that can happen, that the process gets hijacked and rammed through.
Okay, what I don't want, I don't want to go into the specifics of the charter at this particular point. I just want to make sure that based on the resolution, as a council body, this is the direction, and the administration, this is the direction we want to keep moving forward. But I don't want to go over the specifics of the charter.
right.
Because as you know, it's about 80,000 pages, and this is not the time to do that right now. Okay, Councilman Wenzel, go ahead.
Thank you, Council Chair. Thank you, Mr. Abdallah, for your presentation. I know you have some more to add. Gary Miyake stole a little bit of my thunder about the amendment for the golf course. I think that's something we should jump on immediately. I mean, but have it ready for this fall's voting about the no development of the golf course can't be sold. That's something that we have to do, the first thing we do. And you know, I can't, in my right conscience, go forward with this. I think this should be tabled until next year. Right now, we're looking at a $5 million deficit in our budget, and there's talk about hiring a consultant and paying Mr. Miyake his fees, and we don't even have enough money to pay our employees. So I move that we table this to next year after the next year's budget. I know things are important. The really important things can be done through an amendment at very little cost, and they can be done quickly. To redo this whole charter, like it was said, 18 months, let's put this on hold. We have zero money to spend right now.
But the proposal is not to do the whole charter. The
I know, but
proposal
I'm
is
saying
amendment.
we can't hire a consultant. We have zero money to spend. So we can kind of lay down some groundwork at meetings or something, what we want to do once we start it, and figuring out a budget. I mean, the word budget was mentioned. I said, whoa, how can we come up with a budget when we don't have any money to spend? Our city's broke right now, and we have to look at things fiscally, be fiscally responsible right now.
Okay, but just, our city's not broke. I don't want that to start getting out there that we're broke. We're not broke. It's just a part of running a city. There's a certain budget, and sometimes you're a little short, sometimes you have a little over, but we're definitely not broke. So we don't want the state coming down on us with emergency managers. We're not broke, we're okay, we're comfortable.
We have no money then, okay? Let's put it that way. But I'm saying I can't, with the right conscience, approve going any further with this right now in spending any money whatsoever. I mean, we could talk about it, make plans. That's the best thing to do, plan ahead, and get it ready for the 2023 elections.
Okay. Okay, we all set, Councilman?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
For now.
thank you.
For now.
Council Chair.
Okay.
David, the mayor wants to.
No, I thought you wanted.
Well, I
No.
was going to go after you.
Okay, Council Chair?
Go ahead.
You know, I think to be effective, we should bring a consultant. Doesn't mean you're going to pay that person, tons of money. Again, with the help of the county, as mentioned, they're doing it for free. they can come up and they can go through it and just let us know where there's big gaps. Again, there's a lot of liabilities with the way we're going right now with certain things in the charter, and it does have to be changed, amended or revised. But we still need somebody, a body that can actually tell us, somebody from legal, that say this is the way we should pursue.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No
Yeah.
problem.
So basically, I'm just recommending that we do follow what that, that gentleman from the county that says, because obviously they know there's a gap that, with the help of a consultant, and, we don't know what we don't know. We do have to put it out there, see what would it be to get a consultant with the help of our friends from the county to go through this process.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Abdallah, I do know you have a meeting to get to, so I want to thank you, but you said you had a final comment?
Just one last resource for you guys to consider that we've taken advantage of. Councilman Al-Sawafi in Dearborn, as the Wayne County Business Development Manager, led us to, there's a lot of grant money that's available at a federal and state level for this type of work. I also would look at the National Civic League's model charter and some of their grant opportunities as well. The model charter that they draft they try to do it every year. It's in its 9th edition right now, serves as a great North Star for a lot of charter just structure. It's not about, they don't give language recommendations, but just considerations and resources to look at. We've taken advantage of those grant opportunities, which are helping us bring in specialists to conduct certain study sessions. We've also had to have, just some admin support staff to help us with some of the administrative or clerical work around it. Local government is always strapped for resources. We very much understood that coming in. Almost every commission member, actually every commission member on our commission right now has committed to, putting their salary, the $70 a meeting that we get or so, back into our budget for that reason. So, local government is as effective as it is creative, and so when you're thinking about this process, I wouldn't think of it in a box or in a vacuum. It's an opportunity. I don't think citing a charter revision or amendment or a review commission, either of those, needs to be as drastic as thinking that you're going to change the formality or structure of government. It's not always that drastic. There are a lot of provisions in every charter that require just some general updating, and they are worth the review time because of the fact that as time changes, so do laws, and it doesn't make sense to consciously continue to operate with non-compliance with state law or even just modeling or citing the specific regulations. So I would recommend that you guys take a look into that. I've put in my contact information into this packet. I'm happy to serve as a resource for you guys as well, and appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Hassan.
Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. At this particular point, if no other council members have
I
any,
have
oh,
a
I'm sorry,
couple.
Councilwoman Nancy Breyer, go ahead.
Okay, well, a lot of our charter goes all the way back to, here's the first page here, 1961, September. And then it was, then the power to amend was 1963. And then pertaining to what Tom just said, it says, any increase given to any elected official by reason of a council resolution shall be passed in an even-numbered year, to take effect only in an odd-numbered year. I don't know if that applies to what we're trying to do as far as voting in that time frame.
That's
Go ahead, Peter.
superseded by state law and the Compensation Commission.
Right, exactly. The state
All right.
law, the Local Officers Compensation Act, basically allowed the city by ordinance to adopt it, and then that supersedes the provisions in the city charter. That would be
Okay, well, with working elections, I think we're not going to make it this year, but we should be preparing now to
All
be
I
able
want
to
is
do
get
it
the
next
wheels
year.
moving. Get the wheels moving on this.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
Council
Thank
Chair.
you, Councilwoman.
I'm sorry.
Councilman, go ahead.
More question. So, this is for Corp Council. So the big question here, how far can we go in amendment? Like, is there like a manual we can review, like how far in the changes we can do with just an
There's-
amendment? I mean, like Councilman Muscat said, doesn't make sense maybe to have an amendment. Maybe we need a full review. So I know he asked you a couple of questions and he said you have to check. Is there something, like, do we have to check on every single item we need to change? Or
No.
like how
No.
far can we go with the changes?
No, like, for example, I had mentioned the idea of the Warren Valley Golf Course thing. That would be something you could do without any difficulty. I mean, it would take effort, but it could end up being done. It's not going to end up affecting the nature structure of government. The real issue becomes when you start doing things that affect the mayor's power vis-a-vis the city council's power. That's when you start ending up, are you going to go now to a weak mayor form of government if you start doing that? Or are you going to end up not being considered to do that? You're just tweaking around the edges what the mayor's authority would be in certain aspects with regard to, like, for example, appointments. Again, my tendency would be to say, I think those could be done by virtue of an amendment. But then you also have to always make sure that you recognize that there are two issues. Even if I think it's right and I'm right about that, you still have to get through the governor's review. And the governor's review is based on the assistant attorney general who actually is over there. So my sense is if you had specific priorities, and that would be the value of potentially having a committee. The committee would basically sit there and say, you know, I talked to so-and-so, I talked to so-and-so. There are a few things that I think we really need to change right away. Maybe we can end up doing those. Maybe you don't do the full process that's inside the resolution here. Or maybe you sit here and say, look, we're not going to do this at all. Let's take care of the things that we really think are a pressing priority, like the Warren Valley Golf Course, and hold off on this until we can figure out a little bit more about what we're going to do. And if you do that, though, you should pass a motion saying that you're going to rescind the resolution or put it on hold in terms of, just so that there's some clarity in terms of what people are planning to do.
Just to piggyback on,
Go ahead, Councilman.
just to piggyback on the councilman's question, like say we want an amendment to the charter, Warren Valley, for instance, do we direct you to write that amendment?
Right. What I've done in the past is I've ended up preparing proposed amendments. There would be a study session once I get it done. It ends up being given, the council ends up taking a look at it, ask any questions. People can have input from the public. And then if it's good, then I prepare specific ballot language that has to be, usually I do that and the amendment the proposed amendment at the same time, because it has to be 100 words or less, and you have to make sure that it.
That's gonna be tough for you.
No, actually, I'm good at it. It's just that, you kind of got, I kind of understand, George's perspective in terms of some of this stuff. And generally, I haven't had a problem. The only time I did was the adoption by reference, because they always want us to adopt things by reference at the state level. But the Home Rule Cities Act only allows us to adopt certain things by reference.
So say for suggestion, I want this amendment for the Warren Valley Golf Course. I still have to have the vote of this council to have you do that, correct?
Right. You basically do a motion by Muscat,
And so it has to be
seconded by
voted
so-and-so,
before
to direct Corporation
majority.
Council to prepare a proposed amendment.
Okay, so the majority on that would then vote either yes or no, and then you.
I would prepare it, bring it back to you, and then you
Okay.
would basically end up reviewing it, and then if it looks good, you would end up saying it's authorized, and then the city clerk and I would have a bunch of things that we would have to
Now, are
end
we
up
still
doing.
back under the same rules we had before? If I contact Corporation Council, I need to
Let-
go
yeah.
through you?
Right, and the purpose of that, I'm not going to push anybody back. The main purpose of that is to make sure that we minimize the amount
Amount of
of.
calls for the same
With all due
thing.
respect,
the same
counseling
thing.
that we're getting,
Yes.
yeah. If all council members just start contacting our corporation council on a regular basis, keep in mind, due respect, we're paying hourly. We got to keep that to a minimum.
So if two of us call you with the same thing, say Mr. Muscat or
I'll move it
Mr.
right
Wenzel
forward.
already had
Yeah.
this on the
I-
idea?
Yeah, I have not blocked anybody from doing it as of yet. The only thing I've done is I'm being the filter in between. So if
Okay.
I think this is something that's just
That's why
a
I
waste
just-
of our
that's why I just wanted to make
residents'
sure.
money, then I'm going to have a discussion with that council member, see if it really is worth moving forward.
And
Thank
Council
you,
Chair,
Councilman. Okay.
I'm sorry, we're also working on, Mr. Miyake is not just waiting for work to come his way. He's got a full docket right now from the
Times 10.
administration.
The other,
Yes.
So he has a lot of things that we're
Right.
working through.
Times 10. Sure,
Yeah.
no problem. Okay, so with no other, Councilman Wenzel, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple questions. Now, say we want to make an amendment to the charter as far as when a council member resigns and they get a replacement. There was talk before about having the person who had the next highest number of votes would be Rachel Lapointe there, would be appointed to take my place.
That could be done by an amendment.
That could be done by an amendment? Okay. Now, I did have one other question. I lost my train of thought. Okay, if I think of it, I'll bring it back up.
Okay.
Okay.
So next up, I'm going to go ahead and go to public comments in person, and then after that, Madam Clerk, on Zoom, in case there's anybody on Zoom that has questions. So members of the audience, come on up. Madam Clerk, just for clarification on this one, is it 2 minutes or 3 minutes? 2.
He said two, yeah.
I'm sorry? 2.
We both said two, so we're
We
two.
both did it at the same time.
Okay.
I think it'll be okay. I'll be quick today.
No, I'm not referencing you.
No, I
I'm
know.
talking about general.
Let me get, because Ray's not here.
Rachel Lapointe, Merrick Street, Dearborn Heights, Michigan. So I agree, I know he left the room for a moment, but I agree completely with Councilman Muscat that I think that it is beyond time for a full revision of the charter and a full charter commission. I would love to see you guys approve that at a soon-to-be-had council meeting, perhaps. And I did have a question, because I know that it says that it would go on to the next general or municipal election if you guys approved it. So I guess then my question would be, would it go to the August primary or would it go to November? So I don't know if Mr. Miyake would know that off.
My recollection, and I could stand to be corrected on this, but when it says next general election, that means the election in November.
Not a
So-
primary.
Right, so essentially you would end up having to have a vote to basically for the general election.
So if, let's say, council approved at the next meeting in 3 weeks, the regular council meeting, they had a 3/5 vote to have a charter commission and put that question on the ballot, then that would go on to the November one, because there's no time frame for putting it on the ballot. It just says next election.
Right, and then after those people would be selected, then they would.
Then it would actually begin.
But then they wouldn't be selected at that same general election. They'd have to be
Well,
selected there.
Dearborn did it with Proposal A. They asked yes or no, and then they also had the election for the
Really?
commissioners. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, that's in there. That's what Dearborn did last year.
okay, well, then I could stand to be corrected on that.
So then that way, the city council could theoretically approve it in May, and then it would be on November.
I'm sorry.
That would be something to double check,
I
maybe,
think they did in the August election, the proposal, they voted,
whichever one it was.
they proposed, the proposal passed in the August election. That's how everybody ran for the
Oh.
November election.
Okay.
So they voted on it in the August election, then everybody started running for the November
I
election.
thought it was at both of them at the
No, it
November
was
one.
August 1st and November.
Okay,
And that may also have something to do with their particular charter provisions. I'm not
that's
familiar
right. They have other charter provisions on there. Okay, that was my only other question then, is if you guys approved it soon, kind of like, then everybody that would maybe want to be interested in running for that commission would have ample time to prepare. So that was just kind of my thinking. But I agree with Councilman Muscat. I think it's time for our charter to be totally reviewed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Anybody else in the audience? Come on up.
Good evening, Zuhair Abdulhaq,
How much time
Dearborn Heights.
2 minutes.
There is so much in the charter needs to be clarified. If you want to go and review it, it's going to take a long time. Let's take, for example, the time the mayor passed and the fiasco we had, who's going to be in charge and what authority that person will have. It was a joke to let somebody sit for 30 days without any authorities, just to sit there that he or she the mayor. That is a priority to know if anything happened. If the mayor is sick, who decide how sick he is and who's going to be in charge of the city during his sickness? Something has to be clarified there. And you have lots of other things too. At the end of the charter, how are we going to review it? Every how many years? And who decide who's going to review it? And what kind of commission we have? And who select the commission? Who select the budget? Who decide on all these things? You always make me nervous when you bring that 60
I'm
seconds.
sorry. But I have to do that.
Okay. Anyway, there are lots of things, and I believe when I put the resolution with my colleagues, it was for amendment, the urgent ones. We don't want to wait until next year to put this on the ballot. We can accomplish all what we need by having three people from the city council who I trust very much that they will do the right thing. And you can decide on picking up a few people from the city to help you, people who have knowledge, who are interested, and who are committed. And that's the only way you can do it and put it on the ballot in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. Anybody else in the audience? Come on up. And for the general public, the only reason we do these with the 60 seconds, 30 seconds, and 15 seconds, and then eventually stop, so that I, as a council chair, don't have to do it in a rude way where I have to just shut somebody down. So I'd like to do it as courteous as possible so I don't get in trouble with my mom.
I'll just slap you. Vince Strapkowski, Columbia Street. This chart does need revamping, but it's going to take a while to get the committee selected. Let's start getting these people lined up. I don't see putting it off. It's going to take you a while to figure out who's going to be on it. So let's start picking those people and get this ball rolling. And it's going to take us a couple of years to get it done. And let's not rush it like other projects have been rushed in the past with the past administration. All of a sudden, we got to get it done, and there's a while to vote on it. Let's do this right.
Council Chair, before he leaves?
Yes, go ahead.
This is for our corporation council. You have 3 council people doing it. Is there an alternate that, in case something should happen to a council person, that attends these meetings and can be ready to go on the fly?
You mean in terms of another council member?
Yeah.
It's not proposed, it's not
a part of the resolution.
It's not part of the resolution that currently.
But it could be amended
Yeah,
if we
exactly.
did.
Yeah, just in case something would happen to a person.
The only concern would be then you would start having like a majority of the council.
I was going to say,
Yeah, okay.
now we're back to a quorum of council members.
That's, I forgot about that.
It becomes a council meeting almost.
Yeah, okay.
4 of them.
Okay.
Okay. You also have Vince?
Yeah, that was it. I just don't want to see it rushed like past council decisions where, we've only got 2 weeks to get this done. We have to do it now.
So the only rush that there is, Vince, is we had a meeting on this during the last council body,
Right.
and I, as a council chair, wanted this meeting just to continue moving this process forward, or...
Correct.
Or...
I'm not saying-
Or, as the clerk will tell you, then let's kill it on the spot. But I don't like study sessions to just keep lingering and lingering and lingering. I think there was 10, 12 of them that were just lingering at the clerk's office, and that's a big no-no in my book. Either we're going to continue to move forward, or we're going to take it off completely. At this point, and this is not a dictatorship. I listen to what our body says, and it seems like our council body wants to continue to move this forward, and I'm going to do whatever is within my power to continue to move this forward, but no, not rush through, of course not.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Let's move
Correct.
it forward because it's going to take us a while to get the members and the board
Correct.
set.
Correct.
So I don't think setting this off until next year is going to do anything.
Okay, thank you.
Council
I think-
Chair, could I ask Mr.
Absolutely.
Drapkowski a question? Vince?
Oh,
Hang on for a
I
minute.
thought it was...
No, it's me. Would you be interested in serving on something like this?
Possibly,
Okay.
but yeah,
Because I have 3 or 4 people in mind, and he's one of them.
keep me on the back burner.
Okay. Just a question.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Vince. Anybody else in the audience?
Council Chair,
Yes,
I
Council?
have a question.
Absolutely.
I believe,
But,
and this is...
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, I just need,
Kennedy?
and I'm serious about this, I'm not even joking. As a clerk or as a resident? And I always like to clarify that, because I don't want people to,
Both.
obviously we have elected positions, I always want to clarify to the residents.
I don't know, both? I'll say resident, I'll say resident.
Okay, as a resident, go
Okay, do
ahead.
you want me to go down
2
there?
minutes, I'm gonna put you
No,
on.
no, no, no.
Kennedy,
Let's
Dearborn
pretend you're down
Heights.
there.
You want me to go down there?
I'm sorry?
You want me to
No,
go?
no, no, no,
Okay.
just go ahead.
I just have a quick question, because I was looking, I believe the last time a charter amendment came to the residents as a vote was to change the publications. How did that process work? Was that just a simple one where somebody brought it forward? I don't know. And then it went to the governor still? I know it was on a ballot.
Right. What it ended up, Council Chair, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Basically, what ended up happening is we recognized that there was a lot of cost that was associated with publication. And the former city clerk, Prashevitz, basically raised the issue. The Mayor Pletko raised the issue. Everyone was like, can we just do this? And I said, yeah, we can. So they said, okay, prepare the language and bring it back to us. And I prepared the language, brought it back. Boom, we put it in, and it was pretty smooth sailing because it was something that's sensible, and it's also something that the Attorney General's office had reviewed similar issues in the past. So they knew exactly what it was about, and it went very smoothly.
Okay, thank you. Because I know it's a very important topic for a lot of people.
Sure.
But yet you don't want to rush through it, but yet I hear the urgency of some items. So I just wanted to ask that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your activism on our city council and showing up.
She's here at almost every meeting.
Was that?
She's here at almost every meeting.
Yeah, she's always here. She's very active. All right. Anybody else in the audience that has any questions? I see some young ones over there. Do they have any questions for us as a council body? Well, thank you for showing up. Appreciate that. Love it. All right. Madam Clerk, can you let on anybody on Zoom, please?
Stan, you see anybody? No?
I didn't hear what you said.
Nobody.
You are all set. I don't see any
Nobody on Zoom.
hands.
Okay. So if there's
Chair.
nobody on Zoom, nobody in the audience, anything else from any of the council members?
Council Chair.
Councilman Wenzel, go ahead.
I remember one of the things I wanted to talk about is, first of all, I'm not against laying the groundwork down for this to happen, charter review, as long as it's free, we can have meetings and figure out our process, how we're going
Amendment
to.
review.
The charter review, the big charter review, we could lay down some groundwork and see how many residents we want, north end, south end. We can lay down all those that criteria out ourselves without having to pay a consultant right now or something like that. So, but anyway, we're in the process of forming a nonprofit organization called Friends of the Warren Valley Golf Course, and there may be an attorney in on that. Now, Gary, could another attorney write an amendment and present it to City Council for free?
Sure, I would feel that it should end up being reviewed.
I would still want it reviewed by. our
Yeah. Okay.
So I could kind of answer that. So on an amendment, Councilman, I could write one. You could write.
Yeah,
Everybody can
okay.
write whatever they want.
That's why I say it was.
But anything that's going to be voted on by us as a council body, I can tell you, I, for one, would want our corporation council.
Yeah, I know,
to look
but
it over,
someone
absolutely.
asked, Gary said the process would be for him to write the amendment. I was wondering if that has to be done that way. Just out of
No,
curiosity.
it does not have to
okay?
start with him. No.
And now, I got like 4 things here. Council Chair, we've been wanting Corporation Council to give us the change in the Planning Commission rules about power of the Planning Commission. We've been asking it for a while. I guess we shouldn't be asking him. Maybe you can ask him for us to get that.
There's a meeting set up for, was it April the 5th, is it?
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, next Tuesday,
For what?
in regards to that.
On the Planning
Right.
Commission? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And if I may,
Yes, go ahead. Corporation
I've
council.
just been communicating with the clerk's office, and the problem is we have a stack of supplements that I have to end up going through to end up figuring out how it was before 2007. So you'll have something before that meeting, probably this weekend, in terms of what we're looking at, kind of a change in the powers back to the way they were.
Yeah, the wheels are still turning, Councilman.
Okay. And my next question is for Corporation Counsel also. You know, we've been talking about contract negotiations in the past, and we were told we can't negotiate in public. Can you tell, what is the definition of negotiating in public? What can't we do? So, you know, just so we're all safe and not saying the wrong thing or something. What's our guidelines?
Well, you really shouldn't be talking about negotiating specific items with members of the bargaining unit. That's kind of what the real issue becomes, is that you're not part of the city's bargaining unit, and then if you start talking, you're going to potentially end up looking like you're leading these people to believe a certain thing, or you're going to end up revealing what might otherwise be a confidence with respect to that. And this is probably something that's better addressed in a closed session while talking about negotiations and getting some clearer advice with regard to that in terms of specific things that also have to do with strategy and negotiations, because that's where it really becomes problematic.
Yeah, well, we had planned a closed study session tomorrow, and I was going to bring that up, but, I mean, no one can talk to anybody on the administration side or the union side about anything, or, I mean, I'm just curious.
No,
I mean,
you should be able to talk to.
It's obvious
part
I've
of
been
the
talking to both
administration
sides.
Side. The issue is whether or not, how much you speak to people on the union side, and that becoming really what's problematic in this type
Let's
of
not go
situation.
negotiations, though. I mean,
Well,
I could say.
sometimes it's informational, but sometimes it starts to get into issues of, well, what if we did this? And then there you go.
Well, I can't negotiate with either side because I don't know, if I talk to a union member, I can't negotiate because I don't know what the city's offering. So there's no negotiation. I can talk to them and say, boy, you guys should ask for this maybe, or, you know, being a regular person. I mean, I don't say that. I mean, I did mention what I would like to see. And, you know, like I say, this is something that's, you know, close to my
Council
heart.
Chair, if I may.
You know, one second, Councilman. We're going to continue to follow Robert's rules as much as possible. So let's allow him to finish first, and I'll allow you to go ahead and retort.
Okay, maybe in our next closed session we have or something, we'll talk about that more. Okay, now, speaking of the Warren Valley Golf Course and the contract, I'm going to ask the mayor for an update here in a minute, but if we have an idea, something that we want, I talked to the council chair about this briefly, that we would like in the contract, would we go about just making a mass email or mail it to the council chair, or what's the procedure for that?
You could probably raise it either with the council chair or the mayor, and it could be sent to me. I won't do anything with it until one of them basically ends up saying it's fine. And, you know, we're all ears in terms of things as long as it's consistent with the
The only thing on that, when I had the conversation with the councilman on this, I said, allow the administration and the gentleman or entity that are going to be taking it over to start negotiations, start having some preliminary contract. You're probably going to give us some sort of an update as far as where you're at. And then if whatever issue is not addressed or you want to add some more, then we'll start adding at that point. But I felt personally, based on my negotiations and contracts that I deal with on a regular basis, it's too early in the ballgame for us as council members to say, I want this clause and this clause and this clause and this clause, when negotiations between the administration and the LLC that's taking it over haven't even started yet. I'm sorry, not negotiations, contract clauses have not even started yet. That was my opinion.
Council Chair, I disagree with that, though.
Well, it's the LLC that's taking it over.
Council Chair, I kind of disagree, because something might be a very important thing that could be one way or another. So I think what we should do as council members, or even as the public, general public, if you have a concern that you'd like to see addressed in the contract with the vendor or the person getting the contract, email it to you, and so you can have a list of it.
You're welcome to.
Compile a
Absolutely
list.
send it to them.
And
Absolutely.
then we can say, hey, we send it to you. Now, that being said about the golf course, now, I've heard there's been a lot of rumors going around about the golf course and the person that was chosen by city council to get the bid awarded to them. Can we get from the mayor, can we get an update on how the contract negotiations are talking, or is everything on time and the bidder has all the appropriate people in line for everything going on with the golf course?
Okay, I'm going to let the mayor go, but before you do, Mr. Mayor, I want to close this rumor off completely. I contacted the gentleman when, I spoke with somebody that supposedly there was a rumor about this, and I contacted Mr. Issa. First, he was completely thrown off. He had no idea what I was talking about. As I went into it further and said, well, supposedly, there's some rumors, and absolutely, he put him to bed 100 zillion%. There's nothing whatsoever about that. He's working with different people are going to be running the golf course. He's already working on the cards. I mean, he's rattling off all the ideas that he's already got in place.
Good.
He's excited, motivated, and moving forward with this 1,000,000%. And he's looking to open it as soon as possible. But he's still getting a lot of information and, of course, starting negotiations with our corporation council. Go ahead, Mayor.
So, excuse me, Council Chair.
Go ahead.
So we had a lot of questions that were brought up by Mr. Miyake and also Mr. Deep. A few pages of questions that went to Mr. Issa, and he in turn has to give that to his attorney. So there's a lot of questions. To make up the contract, they have to answer a lot of questions. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to take to answer all these questions. So with a suggestion that you guys have to put on a contract, I suggest that we give those questions as soon as possible, because we don't want to draft a contract and, oh, I need to add this, oh, we need this. Then it's going to be chaos, because once we do the contract, we got to try to get it done all the questions answered by Mr. Miyake and also Mr. Deep, who's the engineer. I don't want to go back and say, well, then obviously it has to go in front of the council for approval. I don't want somebody coming back, well, you know what, I got this, let me add this to the contract. It's
So you're
useless.
suggesting you want to send those questions to us?
We need them like
So
yesterday.
for full disclosure, did you want, because once they come to us, my concern is sometimes they go public. Is it okay, Corporation Councilor Miyake, for those to potentially go public? Because once they come to us, as you know, sometimes these things happen.
Look, if your priorities or you state you want specific things addressed, I think it would be helpful. We're on an accelerated time frame.
Yes.
And, unfortunately, Mr. Issa has been busy, I believe, with family obligations. And so, that's one of the reasons I sent something to you earlier today, Council Chair, because not pertaining to this matter, but another thing that I know that you and I had talked about, you wanting, because I want to end up having my plate as empty as it possibly can, which it's not going to be empty, to end up dealing with these things when I expect that we're going to be cracking away at it. So if you've got any suggestions or things that are concerns, remember, if they're sent to me, even if they're copied to you, they can be put under as attorney-client privilege, and that you're seeking advice or you're seeking my input with regard to this or trying to communicate with me in terms of that, and then that will be kept internal in terms of that. And that might deal with the issues that both Councilman Wenzel and Councilman Muscat had, as well as dealing with your concerns.
Okay, thank you.
I've got
So
one more point.
Go ahead.
The Divine Child Golf Club, this year their new home golf course is the links to Taylor, and they're in their second week of golfing already. They've golfed 2 weeks. And my neighbor, his son works at Lakes of Taylor. Lakes of Taylor or the other one, whatever. But I was talking to him, and he said it is up to the most importance to get the greens cut immediately. He said if you let them greens go another 3 to 4 weeks, they're going to have to be all completely dug out, reseeded, and everything. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a plan in the event, because this was in the works for quite a while.
I addressed it with Mr. Issa, and he's all over it.
I mean, something that's going to happen in the next couple weeks.
Well, I mean, he's all over it. Okay, so just a little side note, we had our meeting, and he went on a family vacation for, I think it was 3 or 4 days directly after. I think it was the next day, if I'm not mistaken. He's just back in town as of last night, so he's back all over it.
Okay, well, this isn't really concerning Mr. Issa. It's concerning the city, our obligations to this golf course right now. In the meantime, we should have a plan B where we'd be maintaining this golf course in the meantime instead of letting it go. Because you can't. I mean, everybody knows you cannot let these go. It's got to be addressed right away, these greens. I mean, within the next couple of weeks, especially with warmer weather. That my neighbor told me, he says, "You're lucky that we've had cold weather." He said, "We would have had warm weather." He said, "You'd been in big trouble right now." With other golf courses already open and they cut their greens every day, and we're far behind. We got to do something. We got to get Plan B. I don't know if we do have a Plan B for this. When you take one company and remove them, you got to have a plan to do something in the meantime before you get to another company.
Plan B of what?
Taking care of the golf course before the contract's awarded.
Okay, so
You know?
our administration, of course, will continue to monitor that. Between them and Mr. Issa, I'm
Can
sure
we
it'll
do
be done.
something like that? Can we do something to address this golf course greens?
Well, that's why we wanted to push this as fast as possible. Now you're telling me we got to push it. I've been trying to push this for the last month or so.
And we passed
And that's one of the
everything on
reasons
time.
why I wanted to push this. And obviously, we all know what happened at the last 2 meetings. So we're doing everything we can to get this contract so we can get the operator instead of wasting city money.
We did everything on time, Mr. Mayor.
Wow.
Everything every meeting, we didn't postpone anything. Everything was voted on as scheduled.
Well, now you guys are mentioning questions that you're going to put on the contract. I need those I need them by tomorrow, otherwise I'm not going to take any questions
Well, the-
or suggestions for the contract, because
We
the
didn't-
questions were already submitted to the attorney for us to draft the contract. So I need whatever questions or recommendations you guys have, I need them by tomorrow morning.
Well, that's ridiculous.
And they should come
No,
to you.
no, it's
Okay,
not.
but,
I mean,
okay, Council,
Tomorrow morning? That sounds like the bid process.
no, Councilman, just as soon as you can, if you have some questions, send them to me ASAP. I will send them to a corporation counselor. More than likely, with 100+ questions, as I understand it, more than likely some of these have already been addressed. But if you feel they need to be addressed or something specific, send it to me. I'll be more than happy to send it to corporation counselor and our mayor.
And I would recommend that I be included on the communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just as a start.
Absolutely.
Because it makes it clear it's.
Yeah, I'll
supposed
send it to
be-
you and the mayor, absolutely.
No, I'm just saying in terms of when he initially sends it, I'm not going to bill for it until you give clearance for me to basically be able to bill. I just want to make sure that it's clear that it's intended to come to me, so it's covered by attorney-client privilege.
Correct. Thank you. Okay, we all set, Councilman?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go ahead. You had a question? in
No, well,
regards to
not
the
a
court?
question, it was, according to what was being said here, and I guess Mr. Miyake can comment on this. We sit in closed meetings on negotiations, and sometimes strategy is given to us at certain times. And so I remember I almost got into some hot water sitting in on a meeting one time. If Mr. Miyake came in and told me that I could be, some things could happen. I think it's in our best interest not to talk about negotiations at all, other than we speak to them with the administration. Because I do remember that.
Yes.
I know what you're referencing. Okay. Any other council members have questions or comments? Okay, anybody else on Zoom? Madam Clerk? All
I
right,
don't see any.
study session is over.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.